SeniorLivingGuide.com podcast discusses topics which are relevant to the everyday lives of seniors and their caregivers. We are joined by experts who share their knowledge on a variety of issues. SeniorLivingGuide.com podcast offers solutions and resources to create the best quality of life as we age. And now, let's welcome your host, Darlene Mahoney.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of SeniorLivingGuide.com podcast. We want to thank our listeners who have been the key to our success as we enter our third season of Senior and Caregiver Resource Podcasts. Our podcast can be listened to and followed most anywhere you enjoy music or podcasts, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and even Alexa, and many more. And please don't keep our podcast all to yourself. Share with a senior or caregiver who you think will benefit from the support that we provide. I am your host, Darlene Mahoney, and I am excited to share the news that SeniorLivingGuide.com provides a one-stop shop to finding senior housing, including independent and active seniors, a new home, while providing an excellent resource to assisted living, skilled nursing, memory care, or even home health and caregiving services solutions, and one easy-to-navigate website. So visit SeniorLivingGuide.com today. And I would also like to thank our podcast sponsors, Parish Healthcare and Parish Medical Center. At Parish, they offer the Parish Senior Consultation Center and Parish Senior Solutions, where each patient's evaluation and follow-up care will be personalized to meet the needs of the individual and their families.
At Parish Healthcare, we believe in our community. We believe in keeping our community safe. We believe in the art of healing. We believe in healing patients, healing families, healing communities. We believe in the best and brightest working together for the common good. At Parish Healthcare, our team focuses on you as an individual because every life is a work of art to us. Parish Healthcare, where the art of healing comes to life. Visit parishhealthcare.com/healthaware for a free health risk assessment.
Anne joins our podcast today as a realtor from Palm Beach County, Florida. She is licensed for over 35 years in both Florida and Connecticut. She is trained as a counselor and PhD in educational leadership. Her focus now is on helping vulnerable seniors in transition to a safe environment. Anne is also an expert in hoarding, to include articles in Hoarding for the National Association of Realtors, and presenter to healthcare professional organizations, senior living communities, and public workshops. I'm really excited to have Anne on today because this is a subject that isn't really talked about a lot. We're going to talk about hoarding specifically with seniors, as it is definitely becoming more prevalent, especially after, I think we're going to kind of go in post-COVID, which we don't really talk about a lot on this show, on this podcast, but it has become something a little bit that's escalated. So tell me a little bit, Anne, how did you become an expert in hoarding? It's definitely a unique type of thing.
Actually, what happened is nobody intends to go into studying about hoarding, but as I traveled around and saw different clients, I experienced hoarding at all socioeconomic levels, and I became interested in the topic, and I researched it and did some work with some professionals to talk about it. And it is not a television show. It's not a reality TV show. It is a reality.
Right. It's an overwhelming reality, I'm assuming. So were you a realtor first? The realtor side showed you some of the hoarding side?
That's exactly what happened. I say I didn't go after hoarding. It went after me.
Okay.
The first time I saw hoarding, I was in shock, to be honest. I wasn't expecting it. A lawyer had referred me a case up in Connecticut as a realtor, and I went there, and there were a lot of issues going on, and that's when I first became aware and interested in the topic.
So your first case of hoarding, was that a senior, or was that just a new potential real estate client?
No, it was actually a senior who had been referred to me. Her long-term boyfriend had been put in an assisted living community, and she was now living solo in the house. And the lawyer called me in to list the house, not to deal with the hoarding. But when I got up there, the whole yard was full of chicken coops with chickens in them. And then when I went into the house, there were birds flying around all over the place. And I said, this is beyond my usual real estate assessment.
Oh, gracious. I would bet.
And that's how I began to become aware of it. And then as things progressed, I saw other cases of hoarding, and I did identify some of the psychological factors involved, and they seemed to follow a pattern and a diagnosis.
So that's really interesting. Tell us a little bit more. In your experience now, do you deal with a lot of seniors? I mean, do you specifically search out seniors or real estate that have the hoarding issues? Is that something that you are now kind of specializing in now that you're in Florida?
Well, what I specialize in is helping seniors transition to a safe environment.
Okay.
And more prevalent becomes the fact that hoarding is involved at some level.
Yeah. I actually was talking to someone not that long ago who was talking about that. They're seeing that increase in hoarding. Either family members are noticing an increase in hoarding with their families. Really, honestly, they feel like some of it's related to COVID, that there's some increase in that. I don't know if that's something that's true or...
I think that is true. While seniors have been in isolation and they're frightened and they are no longer in control, hoarding becomes one of the ways that you think you are controlling something. And I don't think we even know the extent of hoarding out there. I would say in the clients that I now see, and I'm called in to do the transitions, but in the clients I now see, I would say over half of them have very strong hoarding tendency.
Right. And I think just from my personal experience, because I did have I feel like the most roller coaster experience with my own dad who did have vascular dementia. And he wasn't a hoarder on the extent of probably what, you've definitely seen and clearly what they show on the television series. My mom was a neatnik. My home that I grew up in was always everything had its place. It was a very clean home. We took things to the Goodwill quite a bit because, if you didn't need it, you just cleaned it out. We didn't keep things, that we didn't need. But as my dad, cognitive decline was becoming more evident, he was collecting things like more dog food than the dog would ever eat and massive amounts of markers that he would pick up when he would go to Costco and cleaning supplies. I don't know why you would need so many bottles of cleaning supplies. So just quirky things of just tons of, and it was just an odd type of hoarding. So it wasn't like you couldn't get through his home, but just some of those types of small end hoardings that I kind of noticed on the cognitive end.
I think probably what was going on is his life had changed drastically after your mother passed, and he was trying to control something. And at least you can control the supply chain to a certain extent. And so that was his grasp at trying to hold on to reality.
And I honestly don't think he recalled when he would go to the store, and he loved Costco, which for one person and a
You should see the lines in front of Costco's early morning. There's lines of seniors in their cars.
Yeah.
And how could they possibly use as much stuff in their little condos as they're buying?
I know. He just loved Costco. And I can remember when, my mom was alive, she would make him bring stuff. I got all kinds of freebie stuff from Costco because she would make him bring stuff over to me. We don't need all that. Take that over to Darlene. And so I ended up making out like a bandit when my mom was alive. So I don't know how much he was buying and keeping and throwing out. And I don't know what he actually needed them for, if anything. Some of the items that I just talked about, clearly have a shelf span.
I think a couple things were going on. When you go to Costco's, it's an event. So you're not isolated.
Yeah.
He was there. There were people around. There were people to interrelate with. And the true definition of hoarding, if I can jump in with that, is when it impairs your everyday living and your quality of life. That's the true definition of it. Was he an extensive collector or a hoarder? It's a fine line.
Right. I will tell you, growing up, his office, my mom would always say, shut the door. he was a photographer and an artist at heart. So he would have all his photography and art things in there. It was always very organized, but there was just a lot of it. And one of the things you mentioned was the television show Hoarding. That show I've definitely watched. I think a lot of our listeners probably have watched it as well. And you think you're going to watch one episode, and before you know it, your whole day is gone because you just get sucked into it. But you mentioned that it's a series, but there are different types of hoarding, and that is definitely a television show and not reality, which we know reality TV is really, truly not reality.
Right. I have to admit that as a counselor, I am not a big fan of the television show. I think it introduces the public to the concept and to the disorder. The problem is it doesn't talk about the remedy.
Right.
One thing I want to alert everyone to is cleaning up after a hoarding. You bring in a cleaning crew, you clean it up, and you think you've solved the problem. You have not even begun to touch the problem. You're simply dealing with some of the side effects. But you really have to deal with the psychological issues involved.
So we chatted a little bit before the podcast. There's different types of hoarding. So there's not just I'm a hoarder and that's it. What, from a psychological, I guess, standpoint, what different types of hoarding are there?
Okay, and I'll just speak briefly technically. Hoarding used to be considered a form of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. It has now moved in popularity, if I can use that term, to be its own disorder. And it's described that way in the psychological literature. And that makes a difference. I think the first one you see, and I don't have these in any specific order, is there is random hoarding. When you go into a property and the property is just in total disorder and there are things all over the place, there are empty ketchup bottles around, there are dishes all over the place, et cetera, et cetera. And that is random. There's no actual purpose that you can see in it. There's also hoarding that is specific. I've been in properties where 3 of the rooms will be perfectly neat and clean, and the other 2 rooms are completely filled to the top with hoarding. Some people do it that way. Of course, one of the saddest and most dramatic forms of hoarding is animal hoarding. And I've had the misfortune to deal with that and to see that. And it's not only detrimental to the individuals involved, what about the poor animals?
Right.
You go into a house and there are maybe 20, 30 cats in it. Aside from the health issues involved, it's just sad for these little guys.
And that could become, I'm just shooting from the hip here, but that could become a legal issue.
Well, we do, and I can get into this, we do in extreme cases, we might have to bring in adult protective service. And then we're protecting not only the individuals, but we move the animals, we're protecting the animals. But unfortunately, when you see that kind of hoarding, a lot of the animals aren't healthy anymore.
Right.
It's not a happy environment.
No, I think, clearly, unless you own a farm, only a certain amount of animals can be happy and healthy inside of a home environment without it becoming an issue. So are those basically the main types of hoarding or? Well,
I have been identifying some other forms of hoarding, and I have written about this. There's a lot of cyber hoarding going on out there.
Cyber
hoarding. People are involved with their computers.
Okay.
They will keep thousands of emails.
Uh-oh.
They will not delete things. And this may touch base with a lot of people.
I have an issue, and it's not that I'm cyber hoarding. I just don't ever open my email, and then I have so many of them, and I'm just like, oh, whatever, until Google tells me, wow, you have so many emails we can't take anymore, and then I spend like half a day trying to delete all this crap out.
What I recommend is that people delete their emails at least every other day. Go in there, get rid of the trash, get rid of the junk. A very interesting form of hoarding that I've also been noticing, and this is sometimes with higher socioeconomic clients, is the fact I know a gentleman who hoards points. He has 35 credit cards, and he's comfortable financially, and he rotates his use of purchasing with the credit cards because he is collecting travel points. Now, this seems reasonable, except that the gentleman is in his mid-70s, and he couldn't possibly in his life use up all the points that he has already collected. And that, in fact, is a form of hoarding.
Kind of like a game.
I guess.
Interesting. So just, briefly tell us some of the experiences that you've had with some of your hoarding experiences and how you've kind of come across them, specifically with seniors and just kind of how you've interacted with them in order to kind of figure out what's going on with them.
The first one I'm going to tell you about, which again was up in Connecticut, that's how many years ago I noticed hoarding, was a real wake-up call to me. I was called in to evaluate a house, and I find these sometimes, coincidentally, I'm called into list of property, and the hoarding is there. And this woman, and she was not a senior, her mother was, and they lived in this house together. Her mother passed away, and as I was doing the evaluation on the house, it was a lovely little house. I went into one of the bedrooms and the room was filled with shoes. And I'm not talking about boxes of organized shoes. There was a big heap of shoes in the bedroom, all, maybe 6 feet high of shoes. And I kind of looked at it and again, you don't want to upset anyone. I said, boy, that's a lot of shoes. And she said, yes, I just love shoes. But they weren't in any order. They were just thrown in a pile. She had been a ballerina.
Oh, interesting.
And her feet had been destroyed, with how they get. If you've been a dancer, she was a professional dancer for years. Not one of those shoes fit her. She could not wear those shoes. And they were designer shoes. And it was really like, it's a psychological problem she's having because she's now infirmed and she just collects shoes.
Yeah, I think it's important for families to know some of the signs of hoarding so that they can address it. Now, that one sounds like it's something, I don't know, and maybe you tell me, if that were my parent and they could afford to just hoard shoes because they had some of these issues with the ballerina thing, let at it, and then maybe sneak in and sell some of these shoes, get rid of them.
Not going to work.
No, you don't, then you have to have the discussion. You have to address that issue.
Yes, because what's going to happen if you clean up after a hoarder? And a lot of times when I'm called in, people say, now I'll just bring somebody in to clean it out. And I say to myself, you'll call me back. Because if you clear something out, there can be a real sense of loss. And they'll just do it again. If you don't deal with the underlying psychological issues as best you can, and if the family does not get involved, it's going to happen again.
So tell us some other signs that a family needs to recognize that hoarding is happening if it's not like the beginning stages. Do you have some tips on that? Because clearly when you can't move through a home.
That actually is part of the definition when it impacts your life. And when you have we call them the goat trails, little goat trails through the property. That's a very large sign of it.
Right.
And there are cleaning crews that will come in and will clean it up. But they know in their own mind that they will be called again. I was speaking to a group of concerned citizens about the issue, and one woman stood up. Lovely lady, probably in her 70s. She stood up and told her experience about how she was a compulsive shopper, which also can relate to hoarding. And she had all these items. Intelligent woman, she knew she had to do something about them, donated them all to Goodwill. When she got home, she had a panic attack. She went back to Goodwill and bought the items back from Goodwill.
Oh, wow.
And she related this in front of an audience of about 65 people. And she was sharing it with everyone. And she was so cute. She looked at the whole audience and she said, but you know what? Don't worry because you can shop again.
She does have a point. This is my question. So when the hoarding gets that bad, you have a hoarder on your hands. What are the signs that you have a soon to be problem? How do you see the telltale signs that a hoarder is emerging?
If someone is suffering from hoarding or is beginning to become more of a hoarder, there are other psychological factors going on. It's probably depression. It might be obsessive compulsive disorder. It's usually not someone is just a hoarder. There are other factors, behavioral factors that will exhibit themselves. And I encourage any family members, if you see your senior acting differently and expressing things that don't seem quite right to you, they really need to look at all the factors, not just the hoarding. The hoarding is actually an example of the psychological problems that are going on. A lot of it is related to depression. Another factor that is, the stats show that many hoarders have problems with their weight and obesity. And if you think about it, that almost fits together. You're hoarding food, you're eating too much. And, so if you see an individual who is triggering signs of cognitive issues, there's never just one. It's not just hoarding. There are other factors involved. And another thing that's very important, and I can't stress this enough, because someone is a hoarder, it does not mean that they're stupid. Many hoarders are very bright, very articulate. They have a mental illness.
Right. And do you think sometimes a life event is something that triggers the hoarding?
Absolutely can trigger it. As you talked about in your own circumstances, your father had a real sense of loss going on. And this was his one grasp that he had on controlling things.
Yeah, I truly believe this is what I can control. And this is how I'm going to try to control what I can.
I have to interrupt with a story that make everybody's mind blow. I was involved with a cleanup crew, and we were talking about the hoarding. And this individual hoarded cockroaches. So the house was consumed with cockroaches. And so you say, oh, you see this, and you go, oh my goodness, we have to get, an exterminator in here, et cetera, et cetera. This was the sign that there was a lot going on there. He had a shoebox that he would fill with some of the cockroaches, and he would take them out in a drive in his car.
Now, were these live cockroaches or deceased?
Live cockroaches. So in this case, you've got really behavior that's going to get more severe and needs a psychological intervention as well as a total clean out.
Right. 100%. 100%. Yeah, that's definitely.
That's a hoarding story. That one should go on TV.
That's not only a hoarding story, but to me, there's a lot of other signs that should be going ding, 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 ding to other people that.
And that's what the family needs.
Yeah, 100%. So I think it's important to notate those signs, especially since we are seeing more hoarding and being really cognizant of that and not just the cleaning out, like you mentioned, but some other things. So with that said, I think we're going to take a break for our sponsors really quick. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about more solutions, because that's what we do here on the SeniorLivingGuide.com podcast is we provide resources and solutions to make seniors and their caregivers' lives better as they age.
Hey, Mom, how's the retirement home search coming?
Oh my gosh, I'm just so stressed out. I don't even know where to begin.
Well, why are you so stressed? What's the matter?
I don't know where to find anything. I just need everything in like one place and know what all the options are.
Does the idea of searching for senior housing seem overwhelming and you just aren't sure where to even begin? SeniorLivingGuide.com has great news for you. We offer a one-stop solution to take the stress out of your senior housing search. At SeniorLivingGuide.com, both our statewide Florida edition book and website are created to make your senior housing search very easy for you to navigate. We provide details on communities, including retirement, assisted living, skilled nursing, memory care, and home health, allowing you to decide which best fits your needs and then connecting you directly with those communities. Visit us online at SeniorLivingGuide.com and start your search today.
At Parish Healthcare, we believe every life is poetry in motion, motivated by strength and determination. As your bone, muscle, and joint healthcare partners, we believe in blending the art of healing with the science of medicine to keep your body in motion. We believe in healing patients, healing families, and healing communities. For a free orthopedic health assessment, visit parishhealthcare.com/orthoaware. Parish Healthcare, where the art of healing comes to life.
Thank you again from our sponsors, Parish Healthcare and Parish Medical Center. We are back with Anne, and we're discussing hoarding, especially for seniors, but we are coming back with some solutions and effective planning if you know someone that's a hoarder or potentially going to become a hoarder, and assisting them. So what are some of your recommendations and thoughts?
All right, let me talk about that. And let me also mention the extent of hoarding that I believe is going on.
Okay.
The stats show that the hoarding population is between 2 and 6%. That's what they're showing. But my personal opinion is, and from the properties I'm visiting, especially down in Southeast Florida, you don't know because you don't get in to see a lot of these seniors. Unless there's a health issue, we're not called in. And when we get in there, especially if a partner has passed away, you can see major signs of hoarding. So I would say the actual hoarding going on is far higher than what the general population believes.
Do you think the hoarding is higher among seniors than it is?
Yes.
With just the general? Okay.
Hoarding, one of the causes of hoarding can be the onset of dementia.
Yes.
So it will go along as you age and as your loved one ages or a parent ages. Just as you watch for other signs of dementia, the hoarding is kind of a trigger that this may be happening, especially if it was someone who was functional earlier on. And in a sense, they're grabbing onto that. I had a client, a very bright man. Actually, he was on television a lot, and he hoarded the tapes from those old tape machines. The calculators. The ones you did manually. What did he need them for? But this was back from when he had a robust career.
Right. It brought him that comfort of being younger and feeling like maybe that's what the thought process was for him.
Yes, of course, it makes it difficult because I do think if people have a hoarding issue going on, do not put a house on the market until you take the steps to make it acceptable to the general public. You do not want to embarrass or make the hoarder feel insignificant or that they did something wrong. They can't help themselves. It's an illness.
Yeah, that's an amazing tip. It's got to be overwhelming for them if they have a family member that they know they need to probably look for an assisted living or potentially memory care for their family member, and the house is a hoarder house. That's a huge undertaking.
It has to be done because it's an embarrassment to everyone. And a lot of times, like I'll go in and you may have seen this also, where you go into a house and it looks great until you hit the garage.
Isn't that everyone's house?
You're laughing. Well, I had a client. We did clear out the house, but we did a psych intervention. She said, "Well, did you find my ex-husband?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "He was in a container." And I said, "Oh, well, I don't think we noticed that when we did the clean out." She said, "Well, I don't know where it is, but it's in the garage somewhere." Yeah, that hurt.
Yeah.
That hurt.
My dad had his cat that he loved in an urn. It was in the urn, but when we moved him over to the assisted living, he had to have the urn, on front and center in his room. And I opened the urn and the ashes were gone. So I'm not sure.
I know.
So we're talking a little bit, about the solutions. So you talked about a psych evaluation. So is that one of the steps when you have a loved one that has hoarding issues? You don't just clean it out and
you can't. Doesn't work.
You can't. So you really do need to look a psych evaluation or mental. So explain that to me.
What happens is if I'm called in and I see that there's a major hoarding issue, I have a team of counselors who oftentimes are paid by Medicare, who we can bring in to help with this. You have to be careful about it, but there has to be a discussion. And I say you need a team approach to hoarding. You need the group, family members, close friends, psychological intervention. And the more people on board to help, the less the sense of frustration and isolation will occur for the vulnerable senior.
Makes sense.
I encourage it to be a group, and I do consult on that, and you can refer to some of the articles I've written on how to approach that. I usually ask that one person be assigned as the team leader, so to speak, to help me with the cleanup, to help me with whatever is needed. But you do need the support of the whole family, and if there's not family involved, with friends or whomever who can help the person in the transition.
We have listeners that listen from all over the country, a couple of international listeners as well. But typically, if you are in any part of this country, who would they contact about a psych evaluation? Would they talk to their primary care physician? Who would they contact?
I think if you're talking about real estate, there are realtors that are senior real estate specialists who are trained to a certain extent to deal with this. I get calls and emails from all over the country. And oftentimes, because of my connections with leading real estate companies of the world, I can make referrals to people similar to some extent to what I do, who at least have the training and, are sympathetic to the situation. I think what you really need is someone who cares, and I can help people find that person to bring out. It may be an aide. In one case we have, it's simply the only one left living that this woman can relate to is the aide. So in that case, the aide was involved, and now the placement is made. She still visits that individual in their memory care unit.
So if you're living in Washington State or California and you find that your loved one has this issue, their best bet would senior relocation specialist and insist on a psych evaluation to get a referral for that? Or
I think I would call it a counseling evaluation.
Counseling.
Okay, I don't want to scare them with
that sounds friendlier.
And I explain this to the family members. You can clean it out. You can bring a crew in for $350 to $1,000 that will clean the unit out. It's not going to help the individual one little bit.
It's just insisting that with that clean out, that there is some kind of mental help that's provided to your senior. It's just not the cleanup.
No question about it. And I have also developed a strategy that has proven to be pretty effective when we do clean out a hoarder's property. And many of the things that they're saving have some cognitive value, at least to them. I have developed a strategy, and I'll share it. Take lots of photographs. And then what I do is I make a memory book. I had a case where the woman had to be assisted to move into a community, and her daughter's room, her daughter had passed away 2-3 years prior to that. She had not touched one thing in that room. And the room was cluttered with all her deceased daughter's belongings. What we did is we took photographs of them and we made a memory book. And when she moved, I gave her the memory book. And I said, you can take this with you to help you remember your daughter and the things she had that you shared together.
I think that is an excellent idea for really anyone that is moving. We talk about senior housing and senior communities and assisted livings. And at some point that becomes the reality for so many seniors where they leave the home that they've had for 40, 50 years where they raised their families, and maybe they've lost a spouse or they've had grandkids, and they unfortunately can no longer live alone. And to me, that's got to be one of the hardest transitions in life, to say goodbye to that home, because once you move into an assisted living, your whole life changes. You lose that freedom a lot of times to just get in your car, drive, go to Publix, plan vacations, and then having family over, having that whole home environment. It's very different. A lot of assisted livings provide beautiful environments for seniors where it can be a whole different, beautiful world, but it's a huge change. It's 180-degree change. And I think to take pictures before they move even not a hoarder, where they can have those memories is of just like a little scrapbook of just the home and the house and exactly how it was when they left, I think that's a really, really neat idea.
I usually give out memory books to my clients that are experiencing those issues, and they love it.
Yeah.
They love having those books. And, they make them, you can purchase them and insert the photographs. Because the other thing is, when you make a transition to an assisted living or an independent living, et cetera, it is on some level the reality that this is your last move.
Absolutely.
And this brings up a lot of other psychological issues about passing of time and who are you going to donate to? What are you going to leave to loved ones? It's a reality that at some point your life is going to end. And I think that ties in with the depression. Nobody's like, oh, goody, I can't wait to move out of the home that I loved. I also, and this I've discovered in working in the different communities, sometimes a family will go and look at a community, and the community is magnificent. The dining facilities are beautiful. It has a swimming pool, especially in Southeast Florida, et cetera, et cetera. No, that's not what matters. What matters is the interaction with the staff and how caring the staff are. And oftentimes the senior themselves will pick a community that the family says, oh, that's where she wants to go. No, it's about the quality of the care that they will get in the community. And I think that's very important.
100%. The community I picked for my dad, and I know we're getting totally off topic, was about the interaction I had with the staff that when I was there and visited. It was an older community. It was a smaller community, but they treated him so amazing. I would choose it all over again.
Yes, to say to the families involved, you're not picking a resort hotel for your loved one. But what I suggest people do is have a meal at the community you're considering, and see who sits with you, see what the interaction is with the other people, and how well they all get along, because you're helping them select their last home.
We talked a little bit about the increase in hoarding. As I mentioned, that has actually been a subject that's come up with other folks. And when I've worked at some of these conventions and chatted with different people, they said it's definitely increasing. Are you seeing it increase? Is that the true reality of hoarding in 2022, going into 2023? And why?
I think we don't know to what extent it is increasing. I have experienced, because now I'm going into homes where people maybe have had nobody in their house other than an aide for the last 2 to 3 years. I think it's far more prevalent than we know. And I think, again, to tie into, it's about the depression and the control and the other psychological factors involved. But yes, I think it's increasing. And hopefully as people get out and about a little bit and have more interactions outside of their home, maybe it will become so necessary to keep them secure by buying or maintaining things. But I don't think we know the true amount of hoarding that is going on. Until you see the community in some cases, how would you know?
Does socioeconomic issues, do those have an impact on the hoarding that could be happening?
I have a woman who lived, before we moved her, in an oceanfront condo in Boca Raton, overlooking the beach. She hoarded Beanie Babies. She had hundreds of Beanie Babies, and money was not the issue. It's not about the money. It's about the sense of keeping control.
Does Adult Protective Services, do they sometimes, or can they get involved in this? And is that a good thing if they do?
Sometimes Adult Protective Services is the only alternative that we have. If the individual is in harm, or we sense that they may be harming themselves, we have to bring them in. And it's not always about socioeconomic level, because if they refuse to move from their apartment, what are you going to do if they are actually in danger for themselves? Adult Protective Service will come in. They will help get the hoarder to a community that on some level will be safer for them. The first option, obviously, is have the family involved. But if there's no other result, we do call in Adult Protective Service and ask for their assistance, and they do a wonderful job. But again, their resources are limited too.
Understood.
And that's a whole nother discussion.
Exactly. And there may be seniors that don't have families, and that, you can definitely find that to be the case sometimes, or they don't have anyone close by that may even be aware that's happening. Being aware of the disorder and helping out the vulnerable population is important. Do you have any additional words of wisdom before we close out?
Well, I'll get back on my sense of what I think is most important. And the most important thing is be kind. Be kind. And I say this to the realtors when I do training for them. It's not about the sale of the house. It's be kind to the individuals involved. And by all means, do not embarrass them. Do not make them feel badly. You wouldn't do that with someone who was physically handicapped in a wheelchair or something like that. So don't do it to a hoarder. even though you may be a bit shocked by what you're seeing, because to them, this is their reality. The idea is to move them on to a safer environment and at some level to an understanding and counseling on what's going on. So be kind and non-judgmental
Right. I agree. I think it's hard because families will take their frustration with the hoarding out on the hoarder. Do you see what I mean?
And that may be part of the problem because that relationship didn't just start.
And that could be part of the problem.
There may be family issues also because, as I said, hoarding is just a sign of the cognitive issues. It's not the end. That's not it.
So it is. It's about making the effort to understand it. It's the same as with like someone with dementia. It's very hard sometimes. You have to really talk to people. And I've talked with so many people who are just starting on that dementia journey with their family member that you can't say, yes, Dad, you remember this is so-and-so. You can't force someone with dementia to remember. You have to understand that they are somewhere different. You can't like flip a switch. So you just talk to them in the world that they're in, and you do it with love and understanding. And the hoarding is similar to the same thing. To understand that it's a psychological problem, that they're having a mental problem, and you can't just turn a switch and fix them because you see it differently.
I think many of the seniors that I have dealt with are experiencing dementia, and hoarding is a manifestation of the dementia. So they kind of go hand in hand. If you think a loved one has emotional issues, it may involve hoarding, but that's not the only thing it involves. Usually you see someone who has other issues involved, and the hoarding is just one of the signs of it. If you have someone family members, friends, who you feel is suffering from hoarding, I certainly am willing to make a referral to someone in your area that can help you with it. Maybe not to the textbook extent that I've gone to, but there are realtors who are sympathetic to that, and you should certainly contact me and I can give you a referral.
All right. Your information will also be linked into the content portion of the podcast. I think we have a lot of information that we've shared. We thank you very much, Anne, for joining us today. And we also want to thank our podcast sponsors, Parish Healthcare. We have just entered our third season of SeniorLivingGuide.com podcast with Parish Healthcare. We really want to thank them for everything that they do for us and their sponsorship. You can listen to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you enjoy your podcast as well. So thank you very much.
And thank you. Thanks for having me and sharing my commitment to helping seniors live a better life till the end.
Absolutely. We really enjoyed having you.
Thank you.